All right, an official welcome to everybody for tonight's episode of the Inclusion Conversation. Tonight we are coming together with our guest Kerry, who we're going to talk to in a little while, and we're going to be talking about communicating our emotions. So just a reminder, the Inclusion Conversation is a talk show which I host in order to break down borders and bring the world closer together, one conversation at a time. In the past season, we focused on all things diversity and inclusion, and then the second season focused more on disability and neurodiversity. It's been amazing. We've learned so much together, and I'm really looking forward to this episode to learn some more. So, if we haven't met yet, my name is Solène Anglaret. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a white woman in my mid 30s. I have long, wavy, light brown hair, and tonight I'm wearing a bright blue dress with white dots and a black scarf. I am the founder of Be Beyond Borders and the host of the Inclusion Conversation. And I'm passionate about bringing people together, learning about new things, and really creating that sense of community where we can share our experiences together. So once again, super, super warm welcome to this episode. So we have 1 hour together. The first half hour is recorded, and I'm going to be asking questions to Kerry. Who's we? That's me. And then the second half of the session is a conversation where anyone joining live is very welcome to ask any questions to Kerry, myself, each other, and also share your own experiences, and especially this topic about emotion. We all have them, and it's all very personal. So we're welcoming all of your stories and thoughts after the recorded part of the session. So without any further ado, let's hear from you, Kerry. Welcome to episode 21. Tell us a little bit more about you and what you do.
Thank you for having me. I'll introduce myself and do an audio description before I forget. So my name is Kerry. I'm a neurodivergent business owner. I set up a company called Discover Inclusion that aims to help connect children and young people to learning, communication, and play by providing them access through physical resources. I am a young woman in my early 20s, mid 20s. I'm a white woman. I've got short brown hair and I'm wearing the brightest, fluffiest jumper because it's really cold in my house. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me. I am autistic and ADHD with a slew of other fun brain shenanigans that when Solène and I were first talking about this was kind of an interesting thing that we connected on was our experiences and how it affects working and being in school and the environment and the way people interact with you. And how you then interact with them. And it was really interesting kind of comparing our experiences with working in institutions and in corporate and that kind of thing. And I do a lot of work on encouraging people with disabilities to be able to express themselves. And obviously something that's really important with that is being able to express their emotions.
Amazing. So before we go any further, tell us how you're feeling.
Anxious, nervous, terrified. No, I'm quite excited. But you've made me feel very comfortable. So nervous, but
Comfy nervous, good nerves.
Yeah.
I don't bite, especially virtually. I can't.
It's difficult. It's difficult.
So let's dive in. So it can be super challenging to know how you're feeling. And even more so, you've talked about experience of neurodivergence. When you've been like masking for a long time and you've maybe lost touch with who you are. So yeah, it's really hard to know like how do I feel? So do you have any suggestions maybe from your experience, working with children, other people, or even your own experience on how can you start to unpack that and reconnect with your own emotions somehow?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the first thing, especially with the kind of people I work with, is finding somebody you can talk to about it, because it's really easy to kind of think about it in your head. And I think a lot of people overthink what they're feeling. And actually just being able to say, send a text and be like, you know what, today I'm feeling awful. I'm sad about this. I'm angry about that. And really acknowledging your emotions as they happen. Especially as young people, we're taught to kind of hide our emotions, and that only certain emotions are okay to be seen publicly. And learning that actually you're allowed to express them. It's just a time and a place about where to do it. So I guess the first step to acknowledging is that you have emotions and that it's okay to have emotions. And again, that also you can have multiple and they can be conflicting, and they can conflict with what society views as a productive emotion. For example, I think we were using the example of if you're running a race and you come second in the race, you're thinking, okay, I'm really proud of my best friend, they got first place, but actually I'm really angry because I think I could have won, and I'm really upset because I actually really wanted to win and it would have been really good for me. But I'm happy because I finished the race, and acknowledging that maybe in that moment the best emotion to express is you're proud of your friend and you're happy that you finished. But when you go home afterwards, you can take a moment to think about how you're jealous and you're angry and how you tripped on a little bit of grass, and you're still allowed to have those emotions. And I think that's, yeah, the key thing is letting yourself express them and not masking behind closed doors.
Yeah, it's almost like a two-prong approach, isn't it? Because first is allowing yourself to feel the emotion and to describe it and name it for yourself. And there's that element of looking within to realize and taking the time with ourselves. And then, like you say, there's like that second step opportunity in a safe space to share and express that emotion or those emotions. Like you say,
Mm.
indeed, they can be mixed emotions. This is a very
Yeah.
famous expression, but also primary and secondary. Some emotions can come and be hiding almost or covering another emotion that we struggle to deal with. I know we've talked before about, I felt for a long time like I was living with a giant emotion carpet where I would put all the emotions that I thought were not acceptable or accepted. And I would judge my emotions regularly. I shouldn't be feeling this way, but actually just acknowledging without judgment, even without doing anything, just acknowledging this is the way I feel and it's okay, and I'm going to validate that it's okay to feel this way is so powerful. And yeah, I think we can we have an opportunity to teach ourselves and to teach each other that skill. And so I'm curious to explore with you a bit more about specific emotions. um, Emotions are messages, right? They're here to tell us something. They're messages from inside. Yeah, can you tell a bit about, I don't know, like maybe sadness, maybe anger, maybe anxiety, maybe joy? Like what are the messages? What are they trying to say?
Well, I think the first thing is to look at, if you imagine like a 10-year-old child. So at that age, they're very much still learning how to control what happens with the emotion. So they're starting to understand that they can feel an emotion, but they can act differently. But the majority of the time, when they have a really strong emotion, age 9 or 10, it comes out immediately. So if you imagine, they come second or third in that race, their emotion that they show, that behavior will immediately be, anger. Maybe they get upset and they cry, or they're stomping their feet. And it's acknowledging that there is something behind it. As an adult, maybe we wouldn't acknowledge that emotion because it doesn't come out physically. But often with the people I work with, whether it's a cognitive disability or a learning disability or simply just another way of seeing things, the emotion comes out initially, if that makes sense. So the behavior is seen. So if we think about jealousy, One of the actions is trying to go tit for tat. It's, I'm jealous of that person, so what can I do to one up them? What can I do to put myself in their place? And understanding that the emotion has it's coming up and trying to achieve something. So if we put ourselves back in that place of being that 8, 9, 10-year-old child, what would that initial behavior be? And so what is it trying to do? So in the case of the jealousy, what's it trying to do? It's trying to become even with that other person. It's trying to express that we're not sure, we don't really like how the race turned out, but what can we do to even the playing field? And acknowledging that as an adult, or as a, you know, as an older person, how that affects us, even though we're not giving that immediate, you know, instant reaction. Anger is another one. These strong emotions, excitement, when you're really upset about something, or things that kind of overwhelm you, they're very powerful and they give immediate action. But then you can look at the other side of things. So I'm trying not to get wrapped up in my own words. When you look at the other side of things, you might look at something like anxiety, which might stop you from doing something. So instead of having an explosive output of behavior, it might say, okay, well, actually, I don't want to ask that person if they want to play with me, because they might say no. Or I'm not really sure about going to this job interview. Maybe I'll just cancel it. My job's fine. I'll be okay if I don't go. And acknowledging that, you know, there is a real thought behind that. Yes, logically, you know, the interviewer isn't going to bite me. The interviewer isn't going to shut the door on me and tell me to leave and they never want to see me again. But if I look at the, you know, underneath of it, actually, why am I anxious? Am I worried about what I'm wearing? Or am I worried that they're not going to like what I'm wearing? Am I comfortable? Am I confident? Do I know the answers to the questions? And kind of looking at things a little bit deeper and seeing whether you can find the reason behind the emotion to help you cope with it. Because emotions, you know, they can be really overwhelming.
Yeah, they can come as massive waves, but I think knowing that there is a message behind them, there is an invitation. For example, I was reading up on like anger is often about something crossed a boundary or a value that you hold dear. And so anger is coming up, or like you said, anxiety is there trying to protect you because perhaps you've experienced something similar in the past that's gone a certain way. And so there's anxiety here to tell you, hey, we don't know how this could go. And we have past experience of it. So let's hold on. Or like sadness is grieving something or someone, can be a job, can be an object that you broke or lost, can be, of course, a person. And it's that grief. And so it's that creating that element of like slowing down to allow you to process all of that grief. And then joy is there to show us that we're really like in this moment, and this moment means a lot to us, and we're aligned with whatever it is that we're doing or whoever we are with. And so I think like associating meaning with emotions is so powerful, isn't it? Because then you can refrain from like judging again those emotions, but actually you can invite them in and be like, oh, hello, like what are you trying to tell me?
Especially
And have that
acknowledging,
curiosity, right?
sorry,
Yeah.
especially
No,
acknowledging
you're good.
the ones that people see as negative emotions, like anger, like being upset, like jealousy, you know, these ones that people are like, well, that's a bad emotion. So we don't feel bad emotions. We put these over here. And like you say, acknowledging that there's a reason behind it. You're getting anxious for a reason. You're getting angry for a reason.
Yeah, and actually that was going to be my question about some misconceptions about emotions. So you mentioned the kind of negative positive. It's really interesting in terms of energy in the body. All emotions are actually positively charged, but some emotions have stronger like energy levels, like you said about anger, they are going to move you to do something, to take action. And some emotions like grief, uh, or sadness, or like inviting you to slow down, so they have lower like energy but they're all positive, actually, like technically
Yeah,
speaking. So I
there's
thought that was
a
so interesting. I was like, why do we keep saying these are negative, these are positive? So maybe tell us more about that, or any other as well misconceptions about
so
emotions.
there's actually a lot of research about how our emotions and the way we react to them, or how our body reacts to them, fit into energy levels. So I think the most kind of famous resource for this is zones of regulation. So they split it. I've just got them up so I get the colors right. They split the emotions into blue, green, yellow, and red. And the idea is that no zone is wrong or bad, but the emotions fit into a zone of energy. So, for example, if you're in the red zone and you're angry or you're excited, you're maybe not ready to learn because you've got so much energy going. Or if you're, say, in the blue zone where you're sad or you're tired, you may also not be ready to learn because you've not got enough energy. You're too kind of mellow for for learning in that sense. And the way zones of regulation works is you can label yourself as being in a zone of energy effectively. And there's lots of other ways of looking at it. Like we were talking about with emotions kind of coexisting, and understanding that, you may be feeling sad and being kind of partially, in this case, in the blue zone. But also you could have a kind of coexisting anger, which kind of pushes you a little bit into the red. And it's all about acknowledging where you sit and then whether or not you want to move yourself into a different zone. So, for example, if you take learning, when a child comes into school in the morning and maybe, they got up late, their little brother got in the way, they spilt some yogurt on their school trousers, they had to go and get changed. Then their little brother kept stealing their stuff before they got to school. And actually, by the time they walk into the classroom, they're really angry. They're really annoyed because just everything's gone wrong for them that morning. And I'm sure, as an adult, I definitely have exactly the same thing. But before you can start work or before you can start learning, you kind of need to regulate yourself. And in the case of zones of regulation, you need to find a way into the green zone to be relaxed and to be ready. But you can't do that until you've processed the other emotions. And I think one of the misconceptions is that we push them to the side and we say, well, I can't feel it anymore, so it's gone. Whereas in reality, if we don't look at it more deeply and process it, not necessarily in that moment, sat at your desk about to work, but that evening go, okay, this is why I was angry, this is why I was upset, and be able to process it so that you don't have a resentment that grows for that emotion, or resentment that grows towards the action that caused the emotion. So the little brother spilling things or stealing things or whatever it is.
And that's such an important misconception. And I think also you touched on earlier, like mixed emotions and like primary, secondary emotion. There is also, I think, a misconception that because you're displaying one emotion in a behavior, that's actually the emotion that you're struggling to process or pushing away. Personally, when I started therapy, I realized that I had a big pot of sadness closed with a very sealed top, like of anger, I just
Mhm.
like, oh. And so I was displaying a lot of anger outwards, but actually it was all this unprocessed sadness that was just ready to explode and like flood everywhere. So it wasn't until I fell in love with sadness in the Inside Out movie, and and now every time I think about sadness, I think about this. If you haven't seen the Inside Out movie, please watch
So
it. Do
good.
yourself a favor, watch it after
I
this.
my first
Tiny,
therapist actually told me to go and watch it for homework. So
it's so good. And sadness, tiny little blue thing with she cries sideways and she falls to her. Oh my gosh, she's the cutest thing ever. And I was like, maybe it's not so bad to feel sadness. And I realize a lot of creativity comes from sadness as well. So it's interesting what can happen when we stop thinking in those negative, positive terms, or like putting everything under the rug, or, simplifying things to one emotion. Like if we really welcome the nuance and the breadth and the intensity of emotions, how interesting it can make our lives actually. And I'm curious now to move from kind of feeling and exploring inwards to more like expressing and sharing. So in terms of like communicating our emotions to others, do you have like some, I know it's simplifying a little bit, but any do's and don'ts, like any things to think about?
Yeah, I would say, especially with the kind of people I work with and the children, young people, finding a visual expression of it. So the Inside Out movie is a really great way to explain how emotions work together because it personifies them. It gives them something likable. We like the character Anger in the Inside Out movie because he's funny, because he does things that we can relate to. We see disgust and we're like, broccoli on pizza? Absolutely not. And it's relatable. But we can do that with, with our friends and with our family as well. So if I'm, for example, when I'm teaching emotions, the first thing you want to do is show that you have emotions as well. So I mask very heavily when I'm working right now, when I'm out and about, because what society deems as an acceptable kind of face isn't what my attitude is on a daily basis. So I go out, and even when I was teaching in schools, and I go into the classroom and I'm like, this is what I am. I'm happy. I'm excited. And then I go in and I'm teaching a lesson. And in this case, it was a group of 7, 8-year-olds. And we were explaining about being angry or being upset. And I was kind of talking to them about it. And they were like, well, miss, we've never seen you get angry. I was like, okay, let me explain what happens when I get angry and how I show it at school and what happens when I go home. Because I said to them, I was like, look, if I scream and shout at you, how's that going to make you guys feel? They're like, okay, yeah, we'd be a bit sad. We'd be like, well, we liked you before. We're not really sure if we like you anymore. Fair play to them. They're 7, 8 years old and they're honest. So I said, okay, so instead of screaming and shouting at you now, I will, I'll be a bit more stern, but I'll try and solve the problem. And then I'll go home and I'll tell my partner, all of these things. But I think then the don't of what you shouldn't be doing is saying, oh, well, I don't get angry. I don't get angry at you guys. Look, I'm happy all the time. You can see I'm happy and excited and I love teaching. To them, you're then showing that they shouldn't be angry because a role model in their life is saying they're not angry. So why should you be? And it kind of invalidates the feeling. So if I say, I never cry, and I'm working with someone who's just had a meltdown because they're overwhelmed, they're overstimulated, it's almost disrespecting the fact that they have that emotion by saying that I don't. Everyone has it in different levels, and how I feel it won't be the same as how someone else feels it. But understanding and accepting that you may have felt like someone else did is kind of a really important step to connecting about it.
Yeah, that's a very important don't, like the invalidation of other people's emotions. Because also, I mean, when you've been invalidated so much, then you tend to invalidate others. So it's like, who's gonna take responsibility or accountability and break that cycle, right? Like to be the person to break that cycle, I think is really, really important. I really love this story, and you're right, children can be so honest, which is really interesting, and it makes us take a step back and reflect. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I find
Yeah.
using children in my examples because they're so honest. It's
Mm.
once, especially even just once they get into secondary school, there's an element of they learn very quickly to mask, as we all do. You know, you go to work, and obviously as a neurodivergent person, I would say I mask quite heavily. But I've spoken to my very neurotypical partner, and he masks, but he had never called it that, because in the neurotypical world, that language isn't used. But, you know, he goes into work and he puts on this, you know, I'm happy, I'm comfortable, I'm confident, I can do this, I can do that, I can run this team. And I think we all do. It's just where we use that language.
Sure. I think also in the don't, I would probably add the emotion dump, like
Yeah,
because
yeah,
in terms of communicating emotions, sometimes we can feel so worked up and just like dump it all on one person. And I've learned that that's not always the most effective way. Not that we can't and shouldn't do that. That's not what I'm saying, but it's good to ask the person on the receiving end whether this is a good time and they're ready and
yeah.
open to like hearing what we have to say and to us sharing our emotions, because then it gives them the opportunity to say, not right now, I'm doing something, or can we talk later. And
There's a couple of
and yes, you go
So
for it.
there's a couple of things that go really well with that. So the first one is setting a timer. So personal experience, I used to work at a PRU. So the children had all been excluded from mainstream school. And so day in, day out, you're being told really kind of deep and emotional things by the children, and then you're dealing with some really expressive behavior, and you get to the end of the day and you're absolutely knackered. But if you don't tell anyone what happened, it just kind of boils up inside of you, and you then take it out on the children the next day. So me and my partner had a rule. He'd pick me up from work on his way home, and it's a 10-minute drive. So I had that 10 minutes to just splurge, not with any intent to get a response from him, just to say the information, just so it was out. And the other way you can use that is by writing or voice recording, voice memos on your phone. Just saying things sometimes kind of lifts the weight off your shoulder. So with children, we do talk therapy or play therapy, and it's about, drawing pictures of how you're feeling, or just putting the emotion into paint or into clay. But as an adult, you might want to be more specific or intentional about it, and writing Word documents, or just grabbing a scrap piece of paper and writing the word angry 100 times, because that's how you're feeling. And that's sometimes a good expression without, like you say, burdening other people, because sometimes they've had a bad day too, or they've had a bad month, and it's not the right time to talk to them about what you're feeling.
Yeah, that's the timer thing that you talked about. It's funny. I call it venting time. And then yeah, you put a timer on 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is, and then you have free flow and the person is just listening. And it's amazing because then you tell them, I don't need solutions. I just want venting time, and because sometimes it can feel invalidating when someone is trying to solve for your emotion, but actually that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for just that space to express that emotion fully. And then totally resonate on your second point. I use journaling a lot. I find that writing puts a distance between what's happening, how I'm feeling, and myself. It's like I am feeling this rather than I am this. I am not anger, I am feeling angry, and it really helps with that step in between. So that's really interesting. And so you talk obviously a lot about the work that you do with children, which is amazing. Do you think there's a difference between like how children and adults experience and communicate emotions? Should there be any? I mean, I think socialization creates a difference, but should there be any?
So there's a point, and I think it's when a child is about 5 or 6, they start to develop the idea that they can control their emotions. So when we talk about like toddler tantrums, we look at a toddler and we're like, okay, they spilt some juice. This is not meltdown worthy. But at that age, the emotions are so overwhelming, and they don't yet know how to control them to the point of an actionable in this case, cleaning up the squash or the juice and then going and getting some more. They don't have the ability to control the emotions to the point where they can action them. You then kind of, when a child becomes, 10, 11, they start to realize that they've got some control. And that's when we see masking coming in, and anxiety, and being able to decide whether or not to show an emotion. It's not all the time, but they're starting to learn it. Then you hit the teens and suddenly they've lost all control again. It's like they're back at toddler level, because there's so much else going on in their body that controlling their emotions is no longer the most important thing. It's no longer the thing that they need to be focusing on. And I think as you turn into in your late teens, your early 20s, you start to redevelop that ability to control not only those changes in your body, but also mentally how people expect you to act. And I think, like you say, the social aspect of it. As a child, it is socially acceptable to have a toddler tantrum in the middle of the aisle in the supermarket. As an adult, if I go into meltdown in a supermarket, the idea of me sitting on the floor, crying my eyes out, maybe hitting things off the shelves, I'd be escorted out, maybe even arrested. So I think whilst there shouldn't be a difference, we have to acknowledge that there is a certain societal expectation that we will be safe and we'll keep those around us safe. And we will ensure that people aren't threatened by our behavior. Along with that comes the stigma of society on, for example, neurodivergence and autistic meltdown, seeing that as a threat when we know that it's not. Society's still learning that. So I think from a point of view of what we can do to support that is being aware of it. And, if you see somebody or a friend that's going through something where it ends up in a meltdown in a supermarket, what can you do to kind of negate the societal effects of that for them? Because they're still going, as an adult, you still feel those emotions. You just have the ability to hide them for a little bit, and maybe to talk them through. So I guess there is quite a big difference, but because we have the ability for there to be a difference, if that makes sense, because we have that control that we don't as a 3-year-old.
Yeah, it's interesting. It resonates with brain development because, like you said, especially around the adolescence time, the amygdala is fully developed, but the prefrontal cortex is still developing, and that's what's creating that disparity in terms of the emotions being expressed very strongly, but not having the editing of the prefrontal cortex in terms of the expression.
You're about 21 that your prefrontal
Yes.
cortex is fully developed. So, we say 18, 19, 20 is an adult, but they're still not quite there.
Yeah, and that's why it's unrealistic to set all these expectations of choose the school for the rest of your life, choose the career for the rest of your life. But your brain is still a work in progress, but please make a selection. It's really interesting. And then I think what you were talking about also made me think about effectiveness, right? As an adult, we have the opportunity to think about how can I express my emotion in the most effective way. And that's a tool that we can use. But in terms of feeling the emotion, I still think that in many ways we're still like children. We feel it. We feel it. It's just our ability to express it, communicate it, direct it is slightly different. But we can have these really intense emotions and have that temptation to have a meltdown in the supermarkets. So yeah, it's really interesting. And I think there's a lot of work to do, like you say, around change and awareness around what we're doing just now, making sure that we talk about emotions more, and we help people to feel them and accept them and nourish themselves, and also learn to regulate their own emotions and each other's emotions also in partnership. So yeah, it's amazing. Thank you so much. This is going to be very close to the end of the formal part. We're going to turn to questions very shortly. But before we do that, you have just published a book. Tell
Yes.
us about your book, and then and then we'll
Um,
turn to questions.
so one of the things that I do with the company is try and encourage parents to take an active role in their children's education, from the point of when, especially when you get a diagnosis of autism, ADHD, cerebral palsy, whatever it might be. Parents are often put into a box of, you know, the child, but we know the diagnosis. And so you get a speech and language therapist, a teacher, an occupational therapist, the GP, the neurologist, etc. And everybody's coming in and saying, this is what's best for your child. But sometimes, you know, you need that chance to connect and to take some time and to go, well, actually, they've just come out of 6 hours of school. I want to have a little bit of fun with them, but I want to be a part of their education. So the aim of the book is to give parents of both neurodivergent and disabled children, but also of neurotypical children and able-bodied children, the chance to connect with their parent through fun activities that also connect to the curriculum. So there's a chapter on numeracy and a chapter on phonics, but also one on diversity and one on communication. So expanding the idea of what learning is, to the point of, it's not just academics, it's also learning that everybody looks different, that everybody, one of the activities is drawing people from books based on what body shape. So, okay, their head's an oval, their arm looks like a triangle, oh, that leg looks like a rectangle, and just acknowledging those kind of differences. And then in the communication chapter, how to talk about it, how to acknowledge that someone else is trying to say something, and just pushing that connection, but also being able to use it, you know, in schools or in libraries, at youth centres, whatever it is, to be able to create that, a bit of learning, but a bit of fun.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Please put the link in the chat here, and then we'll also put the link in the comments for anyone watching the recording. So this is the end of the recorded part. So I'll just wrap it up. All right. So if you're watching the recording, thank you so much. Next time, hopefully you will join us live. The next episode is already on Eventbrite, is the wrap up of season 2, with almost every speaker is available. So it's going to be like 10 or 12, I think, of the people who've come throughout the year, coming back to share their reflections on the year, what they've learned, what's been challenging for them, etc. So hopefully you'll join us. Also follow us on Instagram at @bbonboris if you don't already, and you can rewatch lots of episodes on YouTube. We have so many now. This is number 21, so lots to catch up on if you haven't already. So yes, see everyone for episode 22. Thank you for watching.